Hey there, welcome to the DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts, getting ready to go over the NBA DFS slate for Saturday, January 4th. I'm going to go over it pretty quickly so we can help you out and hopefully win some cash tonight. Pretty interesting slate with some big names out. Let's start off with the news. Ja Morant is obviously out. Steph Curry is out. Then we have some other names to monitor. Looks like Giannis is probable, so probably don't have to worry about him. But with the Bucks, you just never know. Cade Cunningham is also on the injury report. He is probable, and Jalen Brunson is also probable. But just keep a close eye on those guys in case they end up not playing. And then, of course, you have Jimmy Butler serving that 7-game suspension for conduct detrimental to the team for Miami. And then Desmond Bane is also questionable, which is pretty massive news considering Ja Morant is out. And then for Phoenix, Bradley Beal is another name to monitor. Obviously, things could pop up as we go, but I'm going to try to just look at the slate as it stands and hopefully help you out. If anything I do here helps you out, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. That way you get alerted to future videos just like this. Also helps us and helps the community grow. All right, the way we do it is go position by position. We are using Taylor's coined projections here, so they're a little bit different than what you might use elsewhere. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of a boost. Starting at point guard, Cade Cunningham looks really, really good at 48-point fantasy point projection, only 9.9K. So he's priced just about right. Not the guy I really want to go to first just because the matchup with Minnesota is not ideal. It is nice, though, that his ownership is not very high. Just keep an eye on his injury status. I think he's definitely in play, but there are a lot of elite options on the slate, so he's not necessarily a priority for me. I think Hero is a much better play. You save 1.2K. Very similar projection. He is going to carry ownership, but the matchup with the Utah is about as good as it gets. So Hero looks really, really good. Even if you do end up paying up for somebody like Giannis or Wemby or Jokic, which you probably should, because one of those guys is almost guaranteed to wreck and nuke the slate. It just comes down to which one you go get. But Hero looks really good at 8.7K. So at point guard right now, as things stand, if I'm paying up over 8K for a point guard, Hero is the play, in my opinion. Damian Lillard with a little bit of a revenge game against his former Blazers team. I think he's okay. He's an interesting pivot for $500 more away from Hero. Similar projection, not nearly as owned and not too much more expensive. And then there also is Jalen Brunson, who's basically a direct pivot away from Hero, only $200 more. Doesn't project too much worse than Hero. And he's actually going to be owned a little bit more. So it's not like you're gaining leverage there. You're actually losing a little bit of leverage. But honestly, all things told, I think if you're going to pay at point guard, it's going to be Tyler Hero for me. As we go down, there are still other interesting options. Jamal Murray at 7.9K. He's been playing pretty well. I didn't check what he did yesterday. I didn't get much exposure to him yesterday. Yeah, only 29 fantasy points, but he has 252 plus fantasy points in his last 5 games. And in 3 of those games, he has 47 plus fantasy points. So he is kind of feeling it. So at 7.9K, I think he's a decent value if you want to pay down a little bit further, pushing for a 40-point fantasy projection. And the Spurs are a palatable matchup. Again, though, I prefer Tyler Hero for $800 more there. As we go down here, not really into the 7.8K price tag for Josh Giddey. I think if you want to hang around the 6 to 7K range, Chris Paul at 6.3K. On the second leg of back-to-back, a little less interested than I would have been yesterday, but the price and projection are pretty good, so I will just point that out. Russell Westbrook is probably a preferred play if you look at those two guys in the same game. 6.6K, still getting starts for the Nuggets, so I think I prefer him a little bit to Chris Paul, but they're pretty similar plays. But they might not even matter on this slate because Dennis Schroeder at 5.2K looks amazing. No Steph Curry, so Schroeder is going to soak up quite a bit of usage. He definitely did pretty well in his last game, even with Curry there. He had 34 fantasy points in just 25 minutes. No Curry means Dennis Schroeder is going to get – he's going to be pretty involved. So he projects really well. He's not very expensive at 5.2K. He feels like a core play for me here. The matchup with Memphis is not ideal, but Memphis could be without 2 of their key players. And I think they're even out without Marcus Smart anyways. So, yeah, Marcus Smart's out too. And they're down Morant. They could be down Desmond Bane. So, honestly, it's just not a scary matchup as much as it might usually be. So, Shooter feels like a core play. One of my favorite plays of the entire slate. Certainly one of the best pay down options at point guard. I also like Keontae George at 5.7K. The matchup with Miami is not amazing, but the price is good. He has a pretty good role. Now, if we want to play on the Ao Dosunmu, him not being into Kobe White 6.8K, I think he's viable, but I just don't really see a total, need to go do that when you have Schroeder and then even Keontae George there. at way cheaper. Scoot Henderson off the bench for the Blazers against the Bucks. Not the worst thing in the world, 4.8K. I don't hate that value. Scottie Pippen is getting a little bit overpriced, even with Morant out and possibly Bane. I think 6.3K is a little bit steep. I'm going to be interested to see what his ownership ends up being, given that, Memphis is still going to be shorthanded, so we definitely can still consider him, but he has not exactly been crushing, even when, those guys have been missing. Last game, 27 fantasy points, and he's not top 30 fantasy points in any of his last 5 games. So he can get there. He can get it done. I think he's still in play, but he's just not going to be a major priority for me with Dennis Schroeder and some other value popping on the slate. Keep an eye on the status of Tyus Jones. I think he's an okay play at 5.4K against the Pacers, but if he is out, Monty Morris could end up getting a lot more run for Phoenix. And then obviously there would be a boost to the likes of Devin Booker and KD in general. If we want even more value, we can keep going down. Dante DiVincenzo has been pretty good off the bench for the Wolves. He has a good matchup against the Pistons. I think he's okay. Terry Rozier, no Jimmy Butler from Miami, and just a plus matchup across the board against Utah. So those are 2 other ways to save. Last guy I will mention, last 2 guys I will mention. Stephon Castle got the start last night, 3.4K. He, again, remains way too cheap. If he gets the start again, he looks awesome at 3.4K. I think he's viable either way just because he's been getting pretty good minutes. Do we want to go back and use the same guy that was chalky yesterday? I don't really care. I mean, 23, 24 minutes, last 2 games, 29, 17 fantasy points. Matchup with Denver is not terrible. So it's hard to find too many guys around that price range that you feel really, really good about. So I think he is definitely in play. And Lonzo Ball was going to be the other guy at 4.1K. Still no Ayo Dosunmu, as I noted. And Lonzo Ball is getting more minutes than we're accustomed to seeing. 4.1K feels still cheap enough. 22 and 26 minutes in his last 2 games, 21 and 29 fantasy points. I think he is plenty viable if you want to go down and punt. But as things stand, I think Hero is the top spend at point guard, and Dennis Schroeder looks like the best value. Over at shooting guard, you can use Hero there too. He is the best projecting shooting guard by quite a bit. I mean, Anthony Edwards isn't that far behind him, and he is a decent pivot against the Pistons, but I still prefer Hero there. Edwards is in play. He just has not been that dude for most of the year. Devin Booker feels a little bit expensive with him and KD healthy. If Beal is out, I think they both get a minor boost. And I guess for tournaments, he's an okay pivot away from Hero, but still prefer Hero. If Desmond Bane is in, 8K is a really nice price against the Warriors. Not the most amazing matchup on the road, but no John Morant. So if he's in 8K flat, he's going to look pretty good. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're using Hero at point guard and you need some value here, obviously you can kick it down to Dennis Schroeder, as I said, at 5.2. There's also Devin Vassell at 6.2. He looks pretty good. He's been solid for the Spurs. And let's see, same matchup yesterday. He had 39 fantasy points in 36 minutes. So the minutes are good, the projection's good, and the matchup is not that bad. So I have no problem going back to him. He's just a little bit too cheap. Like some of their solid guys like Bane, Jamal Murray, Middleton, Levine, they all look fine. But Vassell is just the way better play based off of savings. You can save a lot of cash there and get a similar projection and big time minutes. So he looks really good. I have no problem with him at all. If we want to keep saving at shooting guard, we can go all the way down. I already mentioned DiVincenzo, Christian Brown. Like, he's not like a nasty per minute guy, but he's really cheap and he plays a lot of minutes. So I said this yesterday going into the slate. He's only 4.9K here. And how many minutes did he get? 43. So I mean, he's going to play big minutes. He had 33 fantasy points. That is 3 out of the last 4 games with at least 27 fantasy points. So I mean, he plays a ton. We say this about the Knicks guys. If they're going to go out there and play 40 plus minutes, I will take a chance, especially at that 4.9K price. So I'd play him over DiVincenzo for sure. If you want a nice pivot, you can look at Toumani Camara for the Blazers. He gets nice minutes. And there's also Jalen Wells at 4.7K. If Desmond Bane is out, Jalen Wells is one of my favorite values of the slate. And you can also use him at small forward. With no Steph Curry and a couple other injuries, just double checking who else is out for Golden State. Podziemski obviously remains out. Andrew Wiggins is questionable. He's probable, so he should be back in there. But Buddy Hield at 3.4K does look like a viable value for sure. His projection is just okay. And I certainly prefer Schroeder and Kuminga and Dre. But I think at 3.4K, we can certainly consider that punt. That's probably going to be it. A lot of these other plays are going to stretch you pretty thin. Again, double down on Castle here at shooting guard if you want to. And then if Jalen Brunson's randomly out, we can certainly look at Miles McBride. At small forward, Josh Hart projects really, really well. Like I said, these next guys all get big minutes. He's facing the Bulls, which is a really good matchup. So if you want to go pay 7.5K for Josh Hart, I really don't mind it. I don't think I feel like I have to do that because there is a ton of them to sell there at 6.2, and Denny Avdia continues to look really, really good. The matchup on the road against the Bucks is not the best that you'll find, but the price is really good, and he's been smashing. So I have no problem going with him. He, along with Schroeder and Vassell, feel like core plays to me on the slate. I think what you do before lock is really good. Just going to come down to where the ownership is and what other news ends up breaking. Mikal Bridges, 6.7K. Where's OG on the newbie? Maybe he's only shooting guard. Oh, he is right there. So those two guys, they are a little bit expensive because they're not the best permanent guys in the world, but big minutes against the Bulls sounds pretty good to me. In the event Brunson's randomly out, they would look way, way better. But if you want to get to them or Josh Hart, nothing wrong with that. These guys just eat up tons of minutes. And Hart is obviously the play if you're going to play one of those guys, but OG and Mikal Bridges just are, considerably cheaper. Malik Beasley with Jaden Ivey out, I'm okay with it, 5.5K. Nothing wrong with that. The Pistons are just going to play around with their starting lineup. Like yesterday, we really liked Asar Thompson, then he didn't start. So you just have to adjust and make sure you're playing guys that you can actually trust. And if Asar Thompson doesn't start, then it's either going to be Wendell Moore or Malik Beasley. So either way, I think Beasley at 5.5 is okay, but I would prefer him to start to play him with any confidence. Mentioned Kamara, Brown, and Wells. Like them all quite a bit with a major lean on Wells and Brown. There is Jaime Jaquez at 4.3K. Great matchup against the Jazz and no Jimmy Butler. So it's good enough for me to go take the dive, even if he doesn't start. But absolutely, I do prefer him to start because I got burned by him the last time out. Over at power forward, KD is projecting like a madman. It is a nice matchup with the Pacers. He's not super expensive. And if Bradley Beal is out, I'm game for doing that as, kind of prioritizing him as one of my studs. If Bradley Beal is in, I'm not as gaga about it. I think I would rather look to one of these higher price studs like Giannis or Jokic or Wemby. So the thing is, he is projecting better per Taylor's system. So between the two, I think I have a lean towards KD here for sure. There is also JJJ, Jaren Jackson Jr. with no John Morant and possibly no Desmond Bane. I think you do have to worry about maybe blowout risk there. And he is a guy that we have to worry about fouls too. And the price is way up. So I think I'm definitely leaning KD over Giannis or Jaren Jackson Jr. on the slate. And he's not projecting for crazy ownership either. So that's also comforting. For a little bit more value, we can stick in the mid-range. Denny Avdia, I already talked about him, like him quite a bit. Jeremy Sohan should be back tonight, which obviously hurts the Spurs value. The Spurs value looked good yesterday. Those guys are not going to look as good tonight. I think Castle at 3.4, you can still take that dive, but the other guys maybe not as alluring. The other guy to single will be Jonathan Kuminga, even if he doesn't start at 6.4K with no Curry. I like that quite a bit. If he does start, even better. Andrew Wiggins with no Curry at 5.6 is fine. I think I prefer Kuminga there. Just projects better, and he's been just crushing lately. And nobody else stands out as like an absolute must. Dre's okay at 5.7 with no Steph. Tobias Harris, once again, no Ivy. He did really, really well last night at 5.1K. It's risky going up against a tougher matchup against the Wolves, but the minutes are there. The usage will be there. I think he's still totally in play at 5.1K. If he gets to be chalky, or even Jaquez gets to be chalky and you're not feeling it, you can pivot to Naz Reid here at 4.7K. Continues to be a really good per minute guy with decent usage off the bench. So I think he is a solid try as well. Nobody else feels like a must down here. Obviously, a lot of different options we can consider just because minutes are opening up, but I already talked about the guys that I really like. On to center to wrap things up. Nikola Jokic coming in with almost a 70 fantasy point projection. He is just balling right now. There's really no reason to fade Jokic. I just think this slate comes down. You're going to have one of these guys. He's had 72 plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, 83 last night. Same matchup against the Spurs. It's obviously one he can feast in. There's no doubt about it. You can play Wemby. You can play Giannis. You can even drop down and go for Cat. There's enough good stuff in the mid-range where you don't have to go get these guys. But again, I think it's a Jokic night. I think he's just crushing too much, too consistently. And his price went up only $100. So if you want to go get Wemby instead, that's fine. If you want to pair them, you can do that too. I don't think I'm going to stretch myself that thin. I think Jokic is the play at center, and he is the top stud on this slate. Already talked about KD and Giannis. Obviously, Giannis is fine if he's going to go overlooked. but KD looks like the play over him. Cat is very, very interesting, saving you $2,000 as opposed to Jokic, and he gets the Bulls, projects really well. Obviously, he and all the Knicks play a ton of minutes, and 10.3K is just about right for who he's been. I think if you're not going to go get Jokic, playing Cat makes a lot of sense on a slate like this. As we go down, though, it's kind of hard to, look at all these stud centers and, ignore somebody like Bam Adebayo. I mean, he just looks really good against the Jazz. Really, not as good of a projection as I would expect it to be. So I feel like the projection is actually a little bit light. And at 8.4K with no Jimmy, he looks pretty good. I think I do prefer Hero, though, just because he's been a more reliable performer. But both should carry a little bit of ownership. And I think if you don't want to pay up for the stud centers, I think you can get away with, potentially you could get away with doing that and go get somebody like Bam. Julius Randle at 7.4K is fine. Vooch feels a little bit overpriced. Don't really want to do that. I already talked about Dre. He's okay. Miles Turner feels a little bit cheap at 6.3K. Nobody else really popping. Bobby Portis is too expensive. Naz Reid is a value I already touched on. And Jackson Davis, I guess with no Curry, maybe a little bit more usage there. Zach Edey technically could potentially feast on the Warriors down low, but 5.6, it's getting a little bit up there for me. Nikola Jovic at 4.6K. His price is getting up a little bit too. Don't think I really need to do that. So overall, I think I'm going to start things off with, Dennis Schroeder, probably looking at Avdia and Devin Vassell, even with Sohan back. And then I'm going to keep an eye on what happens with the starting lineup, specifically with Miami. Really, really, really like Jaquez if he's in the starting lineup. I still like him regardless, but keep an eye on that, and hopefully he starts. Duncan Robinson is also a little bit interesting if he, again, gets the starting nod against the Jazz. And then there is Jaden McDaniels against the Pistons at 4K. So there's a good amount of value here, and Jalen Wells I talked about too, that we can definitely go and get a stud. I just think it is a one stud night. I don't want to stretch myself too thin and leave my lineup open for a bunch of landmines. All right, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you out, and hopefully helps you piece together a winning lineup for Saturday night. Thanks for watching, and good luck.